You know, I wrote this book back about 4 years ago. We actually started writing. In fact, I think we pitched it to the publisher 5 years ago in 2011. Titled the original title was The Crash of 2017. Actually, the original title was The Crash of 2015. Then we made it 17, and then we thought, okay, the publisher wanted 16, so we made it 16. But the premise was that basically, a couple of premises. Number one, that basically every 80 years, all the people who remember the stupid mistakes that were made the last time, typically by conservatives, in fact, exclusively by conservatives, all the people who remembered those mistakes are dead, and so the mistakes now get repeated. And I mean, doing it with Glass-Steagall is a classic example of this. Separating investment banking from checkbook banking, and or what's known as commercial banking. And had somebody proposed on the floor of the Senate in the 1950s or 60s or even 70s, when there were still senators alive who literally remembered the institution of Glass-Steagall back in 1935, and somebody went to the floor of the Senate and said, "Oh, this is working so well, we need to repeal it," they would have been laughed off the floor of the Senate. But by 1999, 2000, when Phil Gramm pitched his repeal of Glass-Steagall, pretty much anybody who did remember that was dead. Or, I mean, there were a few, Robert Byrd and others, who did remember, who were just not taken seriously, and they were outvoted. So there's this kind of cycle to history, and I think that that's one of the big pieces of it. And as a consequence of that, roughly every 80 years, we have a depression followed by a war. 75 years ago today, the Japanese attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor, in part because we had cut off their supplies of oil by barricading the Straits of Malacca, and they felt they had no choice. In part, perhaps because of hubris, or in part, I mean, who knows, right? This is still being debated, but today is Pearl Harbor Day, and we honor the memory of the 2,403 service workers who were died and the 1,178 who were wounded. But let us not forget that today, 75 years ago, and remember I just said 80-year cycles of history? Today, 75 years ago, was the day that the United States entered World War II. Roughly, in fact, we've got that Roosevelt clip, don't we, Shano? Of, the day that will live in infamy, FDR. Yeah. You can dig that out. But here's the thing. Here's where I wanted to go with this, is that the Republicans and the Trump administration, they're making this sales pitch about how we're going to make America great again. And we're going to do it with fiscal stimulus. In other words, spending borrowed money. And which, by the way, will stimulate the economy. And with interest rates where they are right now, as both Donald Trump and Robert Reich have correctly pointed out, with interest rates as low as they are right now, we'd be crazy not to borrow money and invest in infrastructure, which will produce revenue, which will produce more tax dollars than it cost and more money than we had to borrow. I mean, this is great. The great lesson that we learned from the Eisenhower highway system, for example, or from NASA, or, I mean, the list just goes on and on. But David Stockman is of the opinion that that ain't going to happen, because he knows the Republican Party. And his point, and the Republican Party, I mean, the perfidy of the Republican Party is absolutely astonishing. Basically the lies that they tell, just, so easily and comfortably and conveniently and all that sort of thing. And for example, here, David Stockman was interviewed on, first of all, David Stockman, he's been a guest on this program a number of times. In fact, Sean is trying to book him again. It's been a couple of years. He was Ronald Reagan's budget director. Remember, I keep telling you I'm getting echoes of Reagan. Well, I'm also getting echoes of Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. Because, it's kind of the same thing, right? This was 1920 to 1932. Or 21 to 33, arguably. And there's an interesting story over at Huffington Post. The headline: Dems raise alarms about keeping government open with funding expiring Friday. That's Friday of this week. Democrats haven't seen the spending plan the Republicans are expected to release soon and warned it needed to be free of poison pill riders to pass. Number one. So, another continuing resolution to keep the government open, and the Republicans are doing it in secret, and they're not telling the Democrats. They're going to spring it on them and say, vote for it, or else we're going to blame shutting the government down on you. Right? Then, Donald Trump goes out and says, oh, we need to buy American. So the Senate passes a waterways bill. I mean, they literally, it passes the Senate that has a provision in it that, okay, we're going to appropriate a bunch of money to build, water infrastructure, sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants. It's going to fix Flint, Michigan, all this kind of stuff. But it's going to involve a lot of pipe. And all that pipe has to be made in the United States. That was the Senate bill. Republicans and Democrats both voted on that. Went to the House, and Paul Ryan stripped out the Buy America provisions. Sherrod Brown and a bunch of other senators, Democratic senators, started tweeting like crazy, hey, wait a minute, what about the Buy America provisions? But, the Republicans don't give a rat's ass about that. And this is what David Stockman is talking about in this conversation that he had on CNBC a couple of days ago. Here's, a clip from this where he's talking about this $20 billion debt ceiling. Now, that's going to happen actually in March. But he's just basically talking about the insanity within the Republican Party, which he himself, he was, like I said, in the Reagan administration. This is the guy who invented the phrase "starve the beast." Here he is.
So what do you think of this Trump rally?
Well, I said sell the stock, sell the bonds, get out of the casino. I reiterate that call. The bonds have already cratered. They're down something like $2 trillion worldwide, and we got miles to go. This 5% eruption, I think, is meaningless. Some robo-machines trying to tag new highs. What I see ahead is a fiscal bloodbath in Washington for the next year, not the stimulus that everyone's imagining, no big tax cut, no big infrastructure program. What I see ahead is a $20 trillion debt ceiling bomb that's going to go off in mid-March.
There you go. And why no stimulus bill? Why? Well, for example, the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate just passed a waterways bill that will be a stimulus bill that had a Buy American provision in it, sent it to the House, and Paul Ryan, toady of the billionaires, clearly billionaires, including billionaires in China, said, oh, no, we can't have that. We can buy cheaper steel from China. So in clip number 3, Danielle, David Stockman talks about how this isn't going to work because the Republican Party really isn't a party anymore. It's this coalition of gangs. You got the people who hate abortion, like in Ohio. They literally just passed last night. The Ohio legislature passed a law making it illegal for a woman to get an abortion after 6 weeks, after being pregnant for 6 weeks. Most women don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. We won't know if John Kasich is going to sign the law until probably today or tomorrow, and he'll probably do it in the middle of the night. God only knows. But I mean, this is so you've got the anti-abortion gang, you've got the cokehead gang, the so-called Freedom Caucus that don't want to do any deficit spending at all, and no borrowing money. And then you've got the Republicans who are bought off by foreign billionaires. You got the Republicans who are bought off by domestic billionaires. Well, David Stockman says it really well. Here it is, clip 3.
So what part of this is going to work? Is any part of this going to work?
I don't think any part of it's going to be enacted. That's the key thing. This isn't 1981 with Ronald Reagan when we had a $1 trillion national debt. This is $20 trillion. Reagan got his tax cut through by a fluke because he got shot, and for a couple of months there was some sympathy. Otherwise, it never would have happened. This isn't 1965 when Johnson had some huge mandate. Trump doesn't have any. Trump has no program, no mandate, a frail majority that will shatter in the House. The Republican Party is a coalition of gangs, you know, neocons who basically only care about defense and a few more wars, social cons who are cultural warriors, fiscal conservatives in the Freedom Caucus who will never buy massive additions, you know, to the deficit, which frankly will hit $800 billion in Trump's first year before one dime of his program.
Yeah, I completely agree with him. I think that we are headed for an economic bloodbath, and what has always followed that, roughly every 80 years, is a war. And you know, I think, you know, Stockman has nailed this. Stockman, by the way, also predicted that Donald Trump was going to be elected president, and he was not enthusiastic about that, as you may guess. Here's a guy who used to work in the Republican White House, in the Reagan White House, and who later wrote a book essentially apologizing for his role in the giant scam that is Reaganomics, that is ongoing to this day. So, you know, get ready. Hang on to your hats. It's going to get wild. I've got a little more information about this and a little more David Stockman and a few other things to share with you in just a second. Stick right around.